Hello everybody, welcome to the Centbee Show. I'm your host Lorien Gamaroff, and my co-host is the very real and present Kage Ntshingila. Kage, how are you doing? Good, thank you very much. It's getting cooler down here in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all bundling up and
early winter.
It's autumn's ticking by and winter's about to creep up on us, but that doesn't stop us.
You know, rain or shine, Mr. G, we're here, hey?
Yes, we've got a big job to do. Not only are we trying to grow a business, build a global mobile money business, but we're trying to inform people around Bitcoin and what its true nature is, and that most of what people hear when it comes to Bitcoin is a pipe dream, false, hopeful, and misleading. And so our role is twofold. It's to get the message out there around Centbee, of course.
The truth.
But it's to get the truth out there. You know, now with Bitcoin and BTC and crypto hitting these all-time highs, everybody's excited about this halving. And, if BTC...
When is it?
It's coming up in a few days.
A few days,
And at least the BTC halving. The other Bitcoin versions, BSV, has already halved. It has a different timeline compared to BTC, but BTC is the big one.
Yeah, it's the big one everyone is awaiting, and I'm sure like most miners are excited or rather stressed.
Yes, exactly. They're stressed because if that price of BTC is it supposed to double?
It has to, for them to make a killing.
In the next few days. We're sitting at what, $60,000+? It's got to go up higher, otherwise a lot of miners are going to be pulling out their mining operations, because if they're not making profit, they've got to bail. And if miners pull out, it means that it becomes a lot harder to get those blocks coming out. Transactions don't get settled into blocks or confirmed into blocks, and the whole system kind of grinds to a halt. So we're all sitting here waiting to see this magical event that's going to make Bitcoin double in price, just to make the miners still viable. So it remains to be seen how that's going to happen. Of course, all the people in Bitcoin BTC think that, well, the supply is halving, which means if the supply goes down and the demand stays the same, or it increases, the price should go up. So I think they don't even have that sense of worry at this stage. I guess what they're waiting for is wait for the halving. Suddenly now there's going to be the same amount of demand coming into Bitcoin, and yet there's going to be a reduced supply, and that means the price is going to get pumped up higher. But actually, if you think about it, it's not that there's that many Bitcoin still to be mined, at least BTC to be mined. And if you think about the supply of BTC right now in terms of people buying and selling, that's not coming from the miners. That's coming from the market itself, people flipping these currencies. So I don't know how BTC is going to suddenly now become double the price that people are paying.
I think with the same old strategy they've been using, Mr. G, just pumpermentals. I think that's literally all they have up their sleeve. Because if we're looking at the true value of BTC, just really lies in the speculation. There's no value in it if you were to look at it as an actual technology. And we know that for a fact, because we're gonna keep on repeating this. Like, we only take note of Bitcoin SV as the original protocol. So any other, it's, for me, like I said, it's a knockoff, Mr. G.
Yes, and the idea of having a small block size means that miners aren't going to be able to make up that lost revenue with more transaction fees. They've put a cap on how many transactions can get put into a block.
Literally.
And so they depend on the price of Bitcoin BTC going up to make up for that shortfall. So they are stuck. They are going to need to now find a way. How do they generate more income? If they can't generate more income, and if the price of BTC doesn't go up, well, we're going to see miners pulling out, and that hash rate is going to go down.
Yeah.
And often people say, well, the price is directly correlated to the hash rate, more hash power, more security, higher price. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to happen? Are we going to see miners reduce their hashing because it's costing them too much?
It must be expensive, yeah.
Exactly. I'm kind of concerned about people in BTC. I think they've put a lot of stock in this whole halving thing. They're all excited about it. They're all waiting for their bags to double. But it looks scary at this stage. Anybody who's now sitting there waiting for a miracle had better just make sure that they're not risking the farm on something that might not happen.
Mr. G, I think people, like majority of the people, have actually put up their farms there. Because you can tell by the excitement, even on social media, the news, like the only focus is about how much BTC is at this point. And that's for me, I see it as something that's coming to affect a lot of people, because we take it back to what Bitcoin really should be, and it's nowhere close to that.
I think that eventually when crypto dies, because I just have a feeling that it must, these things that don't have legs can't stand forever.
Exactly.
And I do think eventually the value of BSV will be recognized by people, and we will start seeing businesses use it, and the more that it gets used, the more in demand it is, and the more in demand it is, of course, the value is going to go up, or the price is going to go up. Once we get past this crypto phase, and who knows when that's going to be, then yes, we will start seeing a more stable environment for BSV.
Yeah, our messaging has been consistent in terms of what we're trying to expose them to, the true value of BSV. For the fact that you can send cash across the world in a few minutes, traditionally...
A few seconds.
Seconds, Traditionally, it takes days, and the cost again. But with BSV, we've proven time and time again that BSV is the future of transactions.
Sure.
And if people haven't actually explored the Centbee app, I'd suggest you guys check out the Centbee app on the stores there. Just get to experience the power of BSV through Centbee, you'll never ever regret the day of actually getting, to spend your BSV, because it's cheaper, faster transactions, So remember to check out the app on the stores. Mobile money on fire. Also subscribe, show some love. As we're stepping into our second segment, Ms. G, taking it back, 2008, when Bitcoin was created, all I was hearing is that the new money, that's anti-government. You can sort of send transactions without being traced, bringing down the banks. What was that all about?
Yes, that was definitely how people started hearing about Bitcoin in the early days. And it's interesting because the release of Bitcoin, 2009, came just after the financial crisis, the global financial crisis in 2008. And banks were failing, like Lehman Brothers and other banks. And in fact, even before the financial crisis, Zimbabwe's currency collapsed.
Yes.
And that struck me. That was the first time I started looking at money and thinking, what the heck is this? How can money just become worthless? And so that was the Zimbabwe crisis. The Zim dollar went to zero. But then, yes, there was the financial crisis in 2008. And Bitcoin arrived on the scene in 2009. And so a lot of people think that's why Satoshi created Bitcoin.
How can we not? The timing.
Yes, exactly. The timing was just after the financial crisis. And then there was, in the first block that Satoshi created, he added a headline to a newspaper, The Times in the UK. And the headline stated something about the chancellor on the brink of a bailout for the banks. Now, what was happening during the financial crisis is that banks were failing because of the subprime issues, lending money to borrowers who couldn't afford to pay them back for all those reasons. And, the movie The Big Short talks about that. And so this was now something that libertarians and people who are interested in economics from the Austrian perspective, in other words, instead of the Keynesian where, we need central banks who can create currency and they're there to manage it And of course, the Austrian economists who believe that money should be tied to something that cannot be manipulated, like gold, for example.
Yeah.
And so by bailing out the banks, what the government was implying was that, okay, they're ready to start inflating currencies again and printing more money and creating more inflation. And so the fact that it was just after the financial crisis, where a lot of people were starting to see how governments were starting to inflate currencies, and the headline to the article inside the first block that Satoshi released, that combination of events is really what fired up a lot of people who recognized what the governments were doing was negative, would have negative implications in terms of inflation and just debasement of currencies. Now, that is really why we got to this point today where a lot of people, and especially the BTC crowd, believe that Bitcoin was specifically created and inspired by the financial crisis, and its intention through its properties, one of them being a fixed supply, that it was there to now create an alternative system from the central bank system of money that was outside of control from the governments who had now demonstrated that they couldn't be trusted to manage the financial system, and governments through the central banks. So this is now why the BTC crowd have been trying everything to make sure that Bitcoin cannot be controlled and manipulated by law enforcement or government regulators.
I can clearly see how the misconception was brought at that point, because with the message being a part of the first thingy,
yes, the headline.
The headline.
Yes.
I mean, the BTC crowd specifically, it's easy for them to hitchhike that and take a ride because it will fit into their narrative.
That's why it became something that a lot of, not just libertarians, because a libertarian still believes in government and rules of law. It became something that was thought of as anarchistic.
Definitely.
Because the idea was that, oh, well, BTC is sound money that is uncontrollable because of its decentralized nature.
Yeah, because like I was saying to my point, like, that's what, like, the general public is sort of like clued up in. When
yes, that's what they're told.
Yeah, it's like, if you want to move stuff, privately, use BTC. If you want to buy, stuff that you don't want to be found out, use BTC. That was, for me, that was the normal narrative around it.
That's the narrative. And or if you're afraid of inflation, you're worried about inflation. So that's what fired up the BTC narrative and captured the hearts and minds of a lot of well-intentioned people. The challenge is that Bitcoin doesn't actually follow that narrative.
It doesn't,
And we've seen how people in the BTC community have been, since that time, trying to manipulate BTC to become something that is uncontrollable and ungovernable. The fact that BTC have restricted the block sizes to be 1 megabyte, at least they've kept that constraint. That was a constraint that Satoshi Nakamoto put in early,
initially,
but only just at that time temporarily so that it would stop the network from being flooded with too many free transactions. It was never intended for it to be something that was permanent. But now BTC have enforced that limit and said that's part of the system that we want, because it means that anybody can now download the blocks onto their laptop and they can now have some kind of sovereignty or independence, being able to validate transactions and thereby keeping the network decentralized so that governments can't control it. So BTC is now trying to morph Bitcoin into something that fits their goals.
Definitely.
And that's why they don't care about commercialization. That's why they don't care about protocol stability, because this is meant to be something in their mind for the people to use. So it's just about money. It's just about transferring wealth in a way that is decentralized, where I don't have any constraints by government and regulators, and I can do whatever I want. So BTC community have been trying to change and morph Bitcoin into something that fits their goals.
Yeah.
But everything that we've said, at least in terms of the founding of Bitcoin, the release in 2009, the fact that the article was referenced, that is essentially something that has been overblown.
Out of proportion, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And what I want to do is, I've got a tweet here from somebody who isn't somebody who's been involved in the crypto space for years and years, somebody who has those libertarian leanings, somebody from an institute called the Brownstone Institute, and they typically write articles about government overreach and also about sound money.
Yeah.
And he's becoming quite prominent, especially because he recently interviewed Roger Ver, and we covered Roger Ver's book in the last episode.
Yeah.
And, Roger Ver is also somebody who has that sort of anarchist mindset.
Yeah.
He also wants to create Bitcoin, at least change Bitcoin so that it becomes more decentralized, and it becomes harder for governments to control it. But he still believes in the cash aspect of it. He wants cheap transactions.
Yeah.
Now, the tweet I want to read is from somebody called Aaron Day, and his handle is Aaron R. Day on Twitter, on X.
Yeah.
Sorry.
On X, yeah.
And I want to read it because he's now coming in and he's being very vocal about BTC hijacking Bitcoin. So he's very much now listening to Roger Ver. He's doing his research, seeing how BTC stopped being digital cash and is now becoming something that is more about ETFs and central bank digital currencies. He feels like central bank digital currencies are now being enabled because of BTC's inability to be a cash system.
Yeah.
And I want to read this because I want to highlight the misconception that he has, which is what we've been saying.
Yeah.
And I want to counter that with maybe some reality.
Okay.
So on Aaron Day, he wrote this a few days ago. I'm not sure the date, but we'll put that date on the screen so everyone can read this tweet, this post. It's not even called tweets anymore.
It's a post, yeah.
So it says here, Bitcoin was created in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis as a way to offer P2P, that's peer-to-peer digital money for the world, and end fiat-induced government tyranny. Bitcoin was hijacked. Now traditional finance offers better payments, and there are more CBDCs than crypto accounts. In 2009, the promise of Bitcoin was to spread freedom. Because of the failure of BTC today, the hope of Bitcoin Cash, BCH, is to prevent absolute digital tyranny. So, of course, he's referring to Bitcoin Cash, which is now being spearheaded in a way by Roger Ver. Okay. And that was, when we look at the forks of Bitcoin, which are covered in episode 26, definitely go watch that. It talks about how Bitcoin BTC split because of the community, one wanting to change the protocol and the other community wanting to keep it. That's when the Bitcoin Cash fork emerged out of BTC. In reality, it was really just reverting back to the original protocol and undoing all the changes that BTC had made. And then, of course, we now know that BCH itself split. Same reason, changing the protocol. So we won't talk about that. But let's now just try and see, how accurate this is.
Also, just another point, Mr. G. I've actually realized that even like people with sort of like a public presence, like their opinion when it comes to this topic, it's always like the story just ends at BCH.
Well, in this particular guys, because he's now influenced by Roger and read the book Hijacking Bitcoin, he's opening his eyes to what's been going on. Except he also falls short of, and that's because of the narrative he's just explained. I mean, he says here, first of all, let's now try and see if we can break down this tweet. First of all, he says Bitcoin was created in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. So he's referring to the 2009 release date. Now, it just makes sense that Bitcoin couldn't have just been invented in 1 year. From 2008 to 2009. The amount of work and thought that went into Bitcoin, and also, if you think about, Bitcoin isn't the first digital currency.
Yes. Yeah.
There have been many attempts at creating a decentralized digital currency that could solve the problems of double spending. In other words, if I spend money, how do I know if I'm in a decentralized system that the money hasn't already been spent? He is assuming, just because Bitcoin was released in 2009, that it was created in the aftermath.
It was sort of like a response to the crisis.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's already now making a big assumption that something as complex and as well thought out as Bitcoin, just on a whim because of Satoshi Nakamoto's issue with the central banks and the financial crisis, that he would then just go back into his office or whatever he has, his cave, and he would now go and whack out something as complicated as Bitcoin in terms of solving problems that up to that point hadn't been solvable.
Yeah.
So he's already making a big assumption that Bitcoin was created in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, and we can already see that Bitcoin must have been the result of years of trying to figure out how to put together the correct economic incentives to make Bitcoin feasible and make it work.
Yeah.
And even in the early days of Bitcoin, there were a lot of experts that Satoshi Nakamoto would reach out to, or that would just chime in and give their opinion, who would say this is never going to work. And yet it worked. And so that point already seems that he's now putting in a lot of presumption in thinking that this was created in the aftermath and therefore in response to the 2008 financial crisis. But then he says, as a way to offer peer-to-peer digital money for the world, absolutely, I agree. I mean, at least if you think about Bitcoin being peer-to-peer cash.
Yes.
But then he says, and end fiat-induced government tyranny. So there he is now bringing up his presumptions again, and he's saying, 2008, what did we find? We found that because of banks failing, because of the bad decisions they made, not because capitalism failed, but because these banks were, for whatever reason, and you can find the reasons, were incentivized to give loans to people who can't afford those loans. When the interest rates then went up, a lot of those loans defaulted, and the banks found that they had lost money, and some of those banks had to be bailed out.
Yeah.
So he's saying it was there to end the fiat-induced government tyranny. He's saying that governments, because of their ability to control currency through the central banks and the banks, and to be able to create fiat currency, now we have this world where we live in an inflationary world. The currency that we have in our pockets is losing value on a day-to-day basis, and also it means, and when he says government tyranny, he's saying and implying that because of fiat currency, now governments are enabled to be tyrannical, to be able to create wars without having to sufficiently tax people to get the money for that. They can just print the currency. Well, if you can inflate currencies, all you're doing is you're taking the value out of people's pockets, because what you're doing is you're just siphoning that value by inflating the currency. So he's really tied up on this 2008 financial crisis. Because of fiat money, governments are tyrannical, and Bitcoin was created in answer to all of that. So he's presumed a lot. Again, arriving in 2009 doesn't mean that it was only started in 2008 in response.
It doesn't make sense, Mr. G, because, I mean, looking at the technology, it clearly shows that, like I was saying in the previous episode, that a lot of thought was put into this. I mean, considering all the aspects, legal aspects, regulation,
Yes.
Like, it shows that this was like extensive research.
Absolutely. You can't just come up with this.
Years of research,
Years of experience and research and all that. Now, also, let's talk about this government-induced tyranny. Obviously, what he's implying there as well is he's saying that Bitcoin was created so that governments couldn't get involved. They couldn't manipulate the system, the Bitcoin system. They couldn't manipulate the supply of Bitcoin, thereby inflating it. Also, when he talks about tyranny, he's now reflecting on this idea that when it comes to payments and sending money around the world, governments put rules in place.
There should be.
You can't just send money to anyone you like. Governments are going to stop you.
Yeah.
You see? So he's saying that's tyrannical. Now let's try and look at Bitcoin in the context of that sentence. First of all, the government-induced tyranny part. Now, when we look at how Bitcoin has been developed, we know that there is this concept of proof of work.
Yes.
And proof of work essentially means miners that need to invest capital in large data centers with computers all running smoothly. They've got to hire staff.
It's like a proper operation.
It's a huge operation. I mean, it's a very expensive operation. And that's why this halving is, I'm sure, frightening for a lot of them. So it's a very expensive operation. It requires a large data center or warehouse or something. It also needs staff to run. Electricity, you can imagine how much electricity. And so what's happening is that these miners are investing large amounts of capital to be able to mine Bitcoin. Now, just simply that fact, when you have a large organization out there somewhere in the world with this huge operation going on, do you think that they are immune from law enforcement or regulations?
Of course not. I mean, if they have like a proper presence, at least we know who, to sort of like point to if there's a form of accountability that needs to be taken.
Exactly. That was the nature of proof of work and the transparent ledger. Because now these miners have become visible to law enforcement. And if government, whatever it is, whatever regulator sees that there are transactions flowing from accounts that look like they might be linked to terrorist activity or something, or laundering, they need to be able to go and stop that. And the proof of work system was built specifically to make the miners honest. And I've used that word because it's specified. If you read the white paper, you're going to see how many times the word honest is used. And so if you're hidden and anonymous and invisible and no one can find you, are you going to feel the need to be honest?
Of course not. Shady stuff happens in the dark.
In the dark. So proof of work was there to force these operations to become large and visible and put skin in the game, capital at risk, so that if they are now compelled by law enforcement to freeze a transaction, and not many people know this, but with Bitcoin, you can freeze transactions. All you've got to do is go to the miners and say, these coins are linked to terrorist activity. We want to freeze this account.
Sorry, Mr. G. I think a lot of people are not clued up about
They
that.
don't understand this, no.
Like zero information, like based on that. Because if we have a system like that in place, I mean, it clearly shows that we could, inhibit like a lot of activities that shouldn't be happening globally. Because I'm looking at transactions that shouldn't be going to certain places can be stopped.
Yes. That's why Satoshi Nakamoto put proof of work into the system, so that these miners become accountable. And so Satoshi Nakamoto didn't create proof of work so that this mining activity could create something that was impossible to be able to undermine. He created proof of work, at least he didn't create it, but he incorporated proof of work into the system so that it forced miners to become big enough so that they become accountable. Now, when we talk about government-induced or fiat-induced government tyranny in that quote, why would then Satoshi Nakamoto create a system that had accountable entities supporting the entire network? Visible, that are compelled to be honest, because if they're not honest, they're going to have that investment taken and lost.
Clearly, if you're going to be operating like that, that means you have no operations, basically, because it requires you to be honest. It
requires you to be honest. Why? Because if you're dishonest, the sheriff is knocking on your door. He's taking all your servers. He's taking all the staff. He's arresting the directors. That's it. Game over. Rather, be honest. You're going to make a lot more money. Satoshi says that. He says miners would prefer to behave honestly because they would make more money. If they're dishonest, they get found, they get busted, and they lose all that money. So there's already a misunderstanding from Aaron, that he thinks that Bitcoin was created to be something that governments couldn't have oversight over, and that. But more than just the proof of work, the entire transparent nature of Bitcoin.
For me, Mr. G, that's groundbreaking, because in the history of, like transactions, banking, we've never ever had a public ledger.
This is the great thing about Bitcoin, is that it's a universal public ledger.
Yeah.
It's a set of books that you can now reliably look to for information that cannot be changed. Mm-hmm. So the transparent nature of Bitcoin, if you think about how Bitcoin transactions work, they are pseudonymous.
Yeah.
In other words, you can see addresses and you can see amounts, mm-hmm. you can see dates, mm-hmm. and then more than that, you can see how the transactions move through the system, how coins are being sent here, then sent there, and you can trace it all the way back to the beginning. And then companies like Centbee, where we have to now comply with rules around knowing our customer, we now have an identity that we can link to that transaction on the blockchain. Yeah. And so that means now that Bitcoin, not only is it in large data centers that can be accountable, mm-hmm. but the transactions can also be traced. Mm. So the transparent nature of Bitcoin, where we have pseudonymous transactions instead of anonymous transactions, again, just speaks to the fact that Bitcoin was meant to be compliant with rules around payments. Yeah. In cash transactions, even physical cash, the fact that notes have serial numbers means they're traceable.
Definitely, sorry, Mr. G. But I think also the pseudonymity was sort of like misunderstood, because people focus on that as if it's anonymous.
Yes.
So that's why the narrative for BTC was being untraced.
Yes, that's what people misunderstood Bitcoin to be. They thought it was an anonymous system. Yeah. And that's why it was being used on dark market websites. Yep. And people thought, this is great, this is now an anonymous way for me to transact. Bitcoin is not an anonymous system. That's why we even have cryptocurrencies out there that are trying to become anonymous. Now, they use the word private, but that's just because anonymity is just clearly illegal, whereas privacy is legal and allowed. So they are trying to obfuscate the nature of their blockchains by saying, no, it's not anonymous. We know that's bad. Mm-hmm. It's private.
It's just the wordplay.
So it's wordplay. Yeah. They're trying to get around, but they're trying to create anonymous systems because of what Aaron Day believes is fiat-induced government tyranny, and he thinks Bitcoin is there to solve. Yeah. So the transparent nature of Bitcoin, the pseudonymous nature of transactions, and the proof of work system completely counters what Aaron believes to be the truth about Bitcoin. It's not a system that was created in the response to the financial crisis, something that was meant to undermine central banks and work around them, and to stop governments meddling with the system. Bitcoin, if you just look at it, it doesn't make sense in terms of that.
It doesn't, Mr. G. For me, if I look at it like just based on what Bitcoin should really be, it's just also based on the fact that it was coming as a solution to the existing problems, like having to be able to send microtransactions.
Right.
Or, be able to maybe pay minimum amounts on the internet or something,
Exactly. When you look at Bitcoin, you see that was Satoshi's intention, and he was explicit about that. He wanted, and he talked about removing middlemen, not because he wanted to make transactions anonymous and skirt around accountable institutions, but because he could see that by having these middlemen, it increased the cost of those transactions. Yeah. So he created a system, and he titled the white paper Cash. He talks about honesty, and he created pseudonymous transactions. The title of the newspaper, the Chancellor on the Second Bailout for Banks, when you look at that article, it talks about the banks being nationalized, and Satoshi definitely, he picked that article. He didn't pick some other article. He could have picked anything, maybe the back page of The Sun or something, but he picked that. And so, yes, clearly he believed, and he even says in his writings, that there is inflation. Of course, he's aware of these things, but nowhere in Bitcoin does it come across as him trying to create a system that is uncontrollable and outside of the regulatory purview. So even though Aaron Day believes strongly in all that, Bitcoin isn't the solution for that.
Yeah.
Now, he interviews Roger Ver on hijacking Bitcoin, and in his tweet here, in his post, it says Bitcoin was hijacked.
Yeah.
And he says, now traditional finance offers better payments. Now, that's true because Bitcoin was hijacked. Bitcoin was hijacked because instead of it becoming a peer-to-peer cash system, they removed the signatures from the transactions, they incorporated that thing replaced by fee so you can rebroadcast transactions. BTC have neutered Bitcoin for being a payment system.
Yeah.
So he's 100% correct there.
Yeah.
He's definitely on the right page, and of course Roger Ver is on that same page. Roger Ver wishes that people could use Bitcoin for day-to-day payments.
Yeah.
You can go look at Roger Ver's videos for more than a decade, 15 years since, I mean, he was involved very early.
Yeah.
And he was always excited about the ability to make payments, low-cost payments. And so now Aaron Day is becoming aware of these things. He's seeing how Roger Ver is correctly pointing out that BTC was hijacked. But of course, he's got that baggage of wanting a system that governments, again, can't control. You know, Aaron Day is looking for a world where he doesn't believe that things can change for the better over time. He's hoping that Satoshi's invention can be used as a blunt instrument to go and smash all the badness that he sees, rightly or wrongly. As I said, I sympathize with his attitude towards fiat currencies, but he is now, as are many people, especially in BTC, believing that technology can solve this problem. But even if Bitcoin became something like that was anonymous and decentralized, I mean, anyone can look at a world like that and say, yes, okay, fine, there'll be people who are able to make payments without having any restriction, and for the most part, maybe they will be honest, and they'll not intend it to be used nefariously for bad things. But when you have anonymity and you become anonymous, like you said, in the dark, when you can hide in the shadows, of course that's going to encourage the criminal element. It just is obvious.
It's obvious,
So do we really want a system that is uncontrollable and anonymous? Do we want that system? All it's going to do is it's not going to empower the good people. It's going to empower the bad people too.
And funny enough is that, Mr. G, most people push a certain narrative only when it benefits them, until you are on the other end of the stick. You know, like if you're ripped off or, you know, you are hacked and then you lost everything. Now all of a sudden you need a lawful system.
Right. My money was stolen. Sorry, it's decentralized. Not your keys, not your coins. You know, that whole thing. Nobody wants that system. We want to feel that there's some level of protection. If I am wronged, I want to be able to go and get relief for that. And Bitcoin gives you that, because again, those transactions are traceable. And if I was to lose a significant amount of money, I can go to the court system and I can compel the court to, at least the court can compel the miners to recover those funds. We want a world like that, because now it gives us confidence to use that system. If we want merchants and we want businesses and we want people around the world to use Bitcoin, they want to know and feel comfortable that this system, first of all, is legal and what they're doing isn't going to break any laws. But second of all, if there's a problem, that there's some way to get relief and some way to fix the problems. And this BTC, even Bitcoin Cash now, the way they're headed is to try and say, look, freedom is scary, baby. You know, do you want to be safe or do you want to be free? Of course, that's, you know, a good question. You know, do you want to be safe or do you want to be free? It's somewhere on the spectrum. I can assure you it's better to have that margin of safety in terms of your payments and your finances and everything than to just be, you know, law of the jungle.
Because freedom is subjective, Mr. G. You know, someone could easily have the freedom to steal your money.
Yes.
You know, so it's something that also everyone needs to consider in that space. You know, so it's important for people to know which is the real Bitcoin, guys. So remember to check out the Centbee app on the stores and experience the power of BSV. like we've been saying, the worst place you could ever have your BSV on is on an exchange. So send it to your wallet, get shopping, send it around the world to your friends, and also remember to subscribe, comment, show some love. Yeah, you know the drill by now. Mobile money on fire. Sure, Ms. G. Yeah, we've spoken about the inflation and all of that, but in terms of the Bitcoin supply, was the 21 million issued by Satoshi him trying to create sort of like sound money?
Yeah.
Or
the fixed supply does, if we want to talk about Bitcoin now as money, in other words, a valuable commodity that can be used as a medium of exchange. I mean, that's essentially what money is.
Yeah.
That fixed supply does create the sense that now it's a sound system and it cannot be arbitrarily inflated.
Yeah.
But actually it goes beyond that, because the 21 million, when we look at it, people often say the supply of Bitcoin is growing. Every block there's a certain number of Bitcoins that get created and then distributed to the miners. Now that's not actually the supply that's increasing.
Okay.
The supply that Satoshi created was 21 million. That's what he issued.
Yeah.
So he is the issuer, and there are legal aspects to this as well. So he issued 21 million Bitcoins, and the contract, because Bitcoin is bound by contract, a unilateral contract. In other words, one that Satoshi Nakamoto put out there and said anybody who follows the rules of this contract will be issued with Bitcoins at a fixed rate, diminishing over time, halving over time, for the services of hashing and providing proof of work to the system. So Bitcoin is now bound under contract, and the tokens were issued when they had no value.
Yeah.
And now they are being distributed to miners for performing the role that is defined in the contract. And so Bitcoin is a contractual system. And there's a great article on CoinGeek.com that talks about this. We can definitely link to this in the show notes.
Yeah.
And by the way, CoinGeek is a great website if you want to understand real Bitcoin. I just want to plug CoinGeek.com. In fact, I'm wearing this is from
the original.
This is from the CoinGeek conference. It's now called the London Blockchain Conference, which I'm going to be attending in a month's time. This is one of their back to the original protocol.
I remember that they also had the Lorien there.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like a Back to the Future kind of theme. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That whole Back to the Future thing was great. So anyway, I'm wearing a collector's item hoodie here.
That's a collector's.
Yeah. So Bitcoin is bound under contract. If you want to participate as a miner, and if you follow the rules, in other words, this is proof of work. This is the defined in the white paper. These are the rules. You have to do these functions, and by doing these functions, by creating blocks, you get to earn some Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And the Bitcoin gets distributed amongst the miners. And so, because of the contractual nature of Bitcoin, it now makes it possible for miners to say, right, we are willing to engage with that contract and perform a duty, which is mining.
Yeah.
And by doing that, we are going to earn a reward as well as earning the fees.
Yeah.
And so this is now what makes Bitcoin interesting and exciting again, not because it is an anonymous system, a decentralized system that doesn't follow the rules around finance and payments and whatever, but not only does it have proof of work to keep miners accountable, not only does it have transparent and pseudonymous transactions to make sure that payments are legal and under regulatory purview, but also the contractual nature of Bitcoin, again, gives you confidence that if you play by the rules, then you are conducting yourself accordingly within this system. And again, just highlights the fact that Satoshi Nakamoto was not trying to create just a free-for-all system that has no rules apart from the fact that you can just send transactions around and anyone can mine. But it is a system that complies with all the necessary rules and regulations that can give confidence to organizations, to merchants and suppliers and customers and everybody, to say that this is a system that fits very well within the legal framework. And as long as we comply with the rules of the contract, the Bitcoin contract defined in the white paper, then we are now engaging responsibly and have the ability to benefit from this system, as well as having legal protections, because that's the rules of the system. So the fixed nature of Bitcoin wasn't intended, it seems, at first glance, for it to be something that replicates the sound money system, but really as a legal obligation by the issuer, Satoshi Nakamoto, to create this unilateral contract that miners can engage with and participants can engage with and feel that they have all the necessary protections under the law. In summary, when you look at the nature of Bitcoin, you see that it actually fits very well within all the rules and regulations around payments, as we keep saying. And that means it is not something that is outside of the law. And it's not something that regulators can look at and say, this just is breaking all our rules and we now have a huge issue with it. And that, in that way, Satoshi Nakamoto knew that what he was creating was something that could be accepted if it was understood, and could be implemented and incorporated into the traditional financial system itself. It could form a vital backbone to the financial system. So instead of bringing down the banks, a lot of people say that Bitcoin is there to destroy the banking system. This is something that Satoshi was building for the long term, not as a tool to circumvent those rules, but as a tool that can complement the existing rules around businesses, how business conduct themselves, the legal aspects of payments and transactions, by issuing the number of Bitcoins, having a unilateral contract, setting the rules in stone. I mean, we keep saying about the fixed protocol. It's not just about giving confidence to businesses so that they invest on building applications on top and know that those applications won't need to change because the foundation is changing. But also that the businesses themselves can look at the Bitcoin system and say, this is a contract that has legal implications. We are protected by the rules of this contract, and it fits in with the understanding around legal contracts in business in general. So in no way does it look like, when you understand Bitcoin, that this was meant to be an anarchist tool, that it was meant to be something that was decentralized and couldn't be controlled. The facts don't bear that out. Now, there's a lot of wishful thinking about that. And guys like Aaron Day and Roger Ver and even the BTC crowd believe strongly that the power of Bitcoin is bigger than the power of governments and state and regulators. That is just, unfortunately, idealistic, naive, and we are going to see that crumble. And unfortunately, it has suckered in a lot of people who might not be interested in any of that, but are interested in the long-term hope that Bitcoin BTC is going to be doubling because of this halving, tripling, 10xing, 100xing, 1000xing, like it has done over the last 15 years. That's what they are hoping for. People are not getting into crypto because they see it as a system that can eliminate fraud and can bring down the cost of transactions. They're looking at it as a way to get rich. And people like Aaron, even though, I mean, I value his insights, I follow him on X, and I think that his heart is in the right place, except unfortunately, he has that naive mindset that he thinks now finally there's this technology that can save the day and bring about a world he wants. I'm sorry, Aaron, if you move beyond hijacking Bitcoin and you move into a better understanding around what Bitcoin can do, its capabilities, how it functions, you can then better understand the intentions of Satoshi Nakamoto, and you're not going to be beating down this path, which is in fact negative for the adoption of Bitcoin. If you are spouting off stuff like this about how this is going to stop government tyranny in the way you think it is, you're going to alienate a lot of people, not just regulators and government and law enforcement, but also well-meaning individuals, customers, and people out there who want to use a low-cost digital cash system. But your your understanding and the narrative that you're spinning and just basically reiterating that has been spun before is not helping your cause. Listen to Friedrich Hayek. I mean, you're an Austrian economist. I'm not talking to you directly, Aaron, if you're going to watch this. What did he say? If you want to take money out of the hands of the government, you have to do it quietly until it's too late to stop. I feel like we should put that quote on the screen.
I think we should.
We'll get that Friedrich Hayek quote.
We've said it a couple of times, and
yes.
It's actually something that we also relate to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how we are going to move into a Bitcoin world and be able to enjoy all the fruits of Satoshi Nakamoto's labors in creating a system that is low cost, that can benefit hundreds of millions of people around the world. BTC is not going to benefit hundreds of millions.
Just a few.
Just a few for now.
Yeah.
And then those people might, if they're lucky, they can get out in time. But Bitcoin was there to enable hundreds of millions of people to be able to reduce the cost of payments in a legal and regulatory compliant way so that regulators don't try and stop them from benefiting from low-cost digital transactions. So stop fighting that. Stop bringing up this narrative that this is about, it's anti-bank or anti-government. You're not going to win this way. Yeah. Satoshi Nakamoto knew what it took to make this system work. And because of your misunderstandings and your naivete, I mean, that's all it is.
I think it's more that, yeah.
You are shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
BTC, that crowd, you guys have shot yourself in the foot. Mm-hmm. You think you're going to win. You're not going to win. All you're going to do is you're going to ruin it for everybody else. So get off this bandwagon, get onto the Satoshi Nakamoto trip, and that's how we're going to see a better world for all of us.
Straight up. Thanks for that, Mr. G. Yo, guys, you heard it, man. Stop listening to naysayers out there about the real Bitcoin. You know, this is the real plug here, Centbee, you know. So also remember to link up your friends, subscribe, comment. Guys, download the Centbee app, experience the power of BSV. Come on, guys, you're missing out if you haven't already. So yeah, just check it out and enjoy BSV on Centbee, guys. Mobile money on fire. Yeah, thanks for that, Mr. G. I mean, like I always say, for me, I always enjoy a proper unfold of, you know, Bitcoin SV schooling. You know, just getting the real word out there and just, you know, getting rid of the lies and the misconceptions, you know. So yeah, we're going to be stepping into this week's user questions and feedback from socials. Cool, yeah, our first one comes from M Talent. He's saying, great show as always, guys, and awesome Twitter ad for Walmart gift cards. Looks great, keep it up. You see, we're not the only ones who actually still call Twitter Twitter.
Yeah, it's all the everybody who was born, well, yeah. But he's referring to Walmart, yes. Yeah. And so, as Kage always says, you know, we've got a whole lot of global brands inside Centbee Wallet that you can spend at. Yep. And we recently posted about Walmart. So if you're in America and you shop at Walmart, use Centbee. It's a cooler way to pay.
Straight up. I mean, guys, we've been saying if you don't have Centbee, just check it out in the stores and get to experience the power of BSV through Centbee. Okay. Yeah, our second one comes from Sangster. He's saying great input, brothers. Thumbs up.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That's you know, we're getting some nice fans now, posting some really nice comments on YouTube for the show, and our subscribers are growing. So it's nice to see that people are appreciating what we are doing, and it's encouraging us to keep on doing this and bringing you valuable content. And just give us feedback all the time. If you disagree with us, if you think maybe we didn't explain something well enough, or if you think we're missing the plot, let us know, and we'll be happy to engage with you on the posts and even respond in our show.
Definitely. Sure. Thanks, Mr. G. All right. Yeah, our third one comes from User.
User?
Yeah. So they are saying the switch to BSV will be epic. Thank you, Centbee, for the deep dive today. So I guess this was for our previous show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we do think people are going to eventually switch to BSV because it's the only blockchain that works. and it'll be fun when that happens. What's going on right now is the BSV Association, along with some other developers, are all working to develop what is called Terranode, and there's a big company called Nchain, which is very much focused on building out a scalable mining software that can easily scale to millions of transactions per second.
As in Terranode?
Yes, so there's a Terranode. So shout out to Nchain and the BSV Association for all of that and the great work you guys are doing there.
Yeah.
We're very excited to see Terranode pick up, because it's going to be undeniable when BSV is doing millions of transactions per second at very low cost. It's going to be very hard for people to look at that and say, well, BTC at 7 transactions per second, $5 fee is better.
Yeah.
So we do think it's going to be epic when the people wake up to that.
Dev, like I've been saying, Mr. G, for me, the only Bitcoin I recognize is BSV. So yeah, guys, remember to check out the Centbee app and explore the power of BSV. Mobile money on fire. Mr. G, I think we've come to the end of our show.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, Kage. I want to thank everybody for coming in today and watching us on the Centbee Show. We really appreciate you. We appreciate your comments, and we look forward to continuing to illuminate you on this whole subject of Bitcoin and all the nonsense around it, so that you can make informed decisions about your future and make the right decisions and not get suckered into dreams that are unrealistic. So thanks to everyone for watching the Centbee Show. Please come back soon.
It's a wrap.
All right. Thanks, guys.